The night was one of those when the rain seemed endless, like the sky itself had broken open. Streets glistened with water, traffic lights reflected off the puddles, and the few people outside were hurrying home, umbrellas turned inside out by the fierce wind. Among them was David Carter, a young black man in his late 20s, tired from finishing his late shift at the small diner where he worked as a server. His thin jacket clung to his body, soaked, and every step in his worn-out shoes made a squelching sound. Most would have cursed the night, but David simply kept walking with quiet determination. David wasn't a man who had the luxury to complain. Life had taught him toughness early. Losing his parents young, he had grown up bouncing between relatives, never quite finding stability. Dreams of college had faded away when bills and survival became his reality. For now, the diner was his. Only steady income. The pay was small, but he never let bitterness take over. Despite his hardships, he always carried a simple belief: help if you can, no matter how small. That belief was about to be tested. As David walked past an old intersection, he noticed something strange through the pouring rain. An elderly woman was standing beside a car that had clearly broken down. The hood was open, smoke mixing with the misty rain, and she was leaning on a cane, her frail body trembling under the weather. Cars zoomed past, splashing dirty water, but not a single driver slowed down. The woman waved helplessly at passing vehicles, but people either pretended not to see or looked the other way. David stopped in his tracks. He looked down at his soaked clothes, then at the woman. He had nothing to offer except his hands and heart, but walking away was never an option for him. Something inside pushed him forward. He jogged toward her, shielding her with his jacket even though it did little against the storm. "Ma'am, are you okay?" he asked, his voice filled with concern. The old woman looked up, her eyes tired and frightened. "My car, it just stopped. I can't get it to start, and I left my phone at home. I don't know what to do." David didn't hesitate. "Don't worry, let me take a look." Right there in the pouring rain, David bent under the hood, trying to figure out the problem. His hands froze from the cold water, but he kept working. 10 minutes later, the car engine sputtered, coughed, and finally came alive. The woman gasped, relief washing over her. "Young man, I don't know how to thank you." David smiled warmly. "You don't need to. Just get home safe." He turned and walked back into the rain, never imagining how much this choice would reshape his entire future. By the time David reached his apartment that night, his body was aching, his clothes dripping like he had walked through a river. The tiny apartment he called home was as cold and damp as the weather outside. It was a single room with peeling wallpaper, cracked windows, and a small bed that creaked with every movement. A bucket in the corner caught drops from a leak in the ceiling. David hung his wet clothes and sat heavily on the edge of the bed. He stared at his reflection in the dark window. Tired eyes, rough hands, and a weary soul stared back at him. He knew he deserved more in life, but opportunities had never come his way. The world, it seemed, had a way of forgetting people like him. He thought back to the woman he helped. In truth, he had no idea who she was, nor did he care. To him, it didn't matter whether she was rich, poor, famous, or unknown. She was just someone in need, and he had been there. His mother's words echoed in his mind, words she had told him long ago before life took her away too soon. "Son, kindness always comes back. Sometimes when you least expect it." Still, David didn't expect much. He knew tomorrow would be the same routine. Wake up, put on his old uniform, serve customers who barely looked at him, and return home exhausted. That was his life. But as he drifted to sleep with the sound of rain still tapping against the window, he had no clue that his simple act of compassion had already set things in motion. Life had been watching, and fate was preparing something extraordinary. The next morning, David woke to the pale light of dawn sneaking through the cracks in his curtains. His body felt heavy, but he forced himself up. The diner wouldn't run itself, and he needed every dollar he could earn. He dressed in his faded uniform, patched at the elbow, and made his way to work. When he stepped into the diner, something was off. The usual chatter of the morning crowd seemed hushed, and several coworkers glanced at him with wide eyes. Even his manager, a grumpy man rarely impressed by anything, seemed unusually alert. "David?" the manager called, motioning him over. "Do you know who that woman was you helped last night?" David blinked, confused. "What woman?" "The one with the broken car." That wasn't just any old lady, that was Margaret Ellis. The name meant nothing to David, but the manager leaned closer, lowering his voice. "She's the owner of Ellis Enterprises, one of the richest women in the entire state. She practically built half this city. She could buy this diner 100 times over. David's eyes widened. He had helped a woman worth millions without even knowing it. To him, she had just been someone stranded in the rain. He chuckled nervously. It doesn't matter who she was. She needed help. But whispers had already begun. Customers who overheard leaned in. Staff exchanged excited looks. To them, it seemed like something out of a movie. An unknown young man crossing paths with a wealthy, powerful figure by chance. David shook his head and got back to work, serving coffee, cleaning tables and refilling orders. Yet somewhere deep, inside, curiosity stirred. Would he ever see that woman again? Or had his small moment of kindness already disappeared into the stormy night? That afternoon, as rain clouds gathered once again, the diner door chimed. In walked a familiar figure, and David's heart skipped. It was the same elderly woman from last night, but this time she wasn't struggling. She was dressed elegantly, her cane steady, flanked by 2 assistants in tailored suits. The diner fell silent. Every eye followed her as she made her way, straight to David's counter. "Good afternoon," she said warmly, her voice carrying both authority and kindness. "Do you remember me?" David nodded shyly. "Of course. You're the lady from last night. Did the car make it home okay?" She laughed softly. "Yes, thanks to you. I must confess, young man, I'm not used to people helping me without expecting something in return. You asked for nothing, not even my name. That touched me more than you know." David's cheeks warmed. "I just did what anyone should do." She shook her head gently. "No, not everyone. Many passed me by, but only you stopped." Then she handed him an envelope. "This is for you. Please, open it." Inside was a letter offering him a full-time position at Ellis Enterprises. The salary was more than triple what he earned at the diner. It came with benefits, stability, and most importantly, opportunity. David's hands trembled. He looked up, speechless. Why me?" Margaret smiled. "Because the world needs more people like you, and because sometimes life must reward those who show true character when no one's watching." The diner erupted in whispers. Some were jealous, others amazed. But for David, the world had shifted. A simple choice in the rain had brought him to this moment. That night, David sat alone in his small apartment, staring at the letter. The words on the page almost didn't feel real. A stable job, a salary that could finally lift him out of poverty, and a chance at something greater than survival. For years, he had prayed for opportunities like this, but they never came. And now, one had landed right in his lap, all because of a moment of kindness. But as much as he wanted to leap at the chance, doubts swirled in his mind. Was he qualified? Could someone like him, who never finished college, work in a big company like Ellis Enterprises? Would he fit in among people who wore suits and carried briefcases when he barely owned 2 good shirts? David remembered all the times he had been judged, not for his character, but for his skin, his poverty, his lack of connections. The world didn't always treat men like him fairly. What if this was just another test, another disappointment waiting to happen? He lay back on the bed, listening to the creaking springs. His mother's voice echoed again in his mind. "Do good, and good will return to you. Don't ever doubt your worth." Maybe this was the return she had spoken about, the blessing hidden in the storm. The next morning, David walked to the diner one last time. He folded his apron, shook his manager's hand, and said quietly, "Thank you for everything. I won't be back." The manager, usually gruff, surprised him with a nod of respect. "Go make something of yourself, kid. You've earned it." With that, David carried the letter to Ellis Enterprises, his heart pounding as he stepped into the towering glass building for the first time. For the first time in his life, he wasn't walking into just another job. He was walking into a future. David's first weeks at Ellis Enterprises were overwhelming. The building itself felt like another planet. Gleaming floors, elevators that whispered open, and employees dressed in expensive suits, carrying themselves with confidence he had never known. He started in a modest role as a junior assistant, but he treated every task, no matter how small, with dedication. Filing documents, running errands, learning company systems. He poured his heart into it. His coworkers noticed he wasn't the most educated, but he was the most determined. Margaret Ellis herself often checked on him. To her, David wasn't just another employee. He was a reminder that character mattered more than status. She would sometimes stop by his desk, asking, "How are you settling in, David?" He always answered with gratitude, though inside he was still nervous about whether he truly belonged. But slowly, something began to shift. David's kindness, the same quality that had brought him here, started to shine in the workplace too. He helped colleagues without being asked, stayed late to finish tasks, and treated everyone, from the janitor to the executives, with equal respect. In a world where many chased only profit, David stood out. One afternoon, a senior manager watched him patiently assist a new intern who was struggling. The manager later told Margaret, "That young man has something rare. He's not just working for a paycheck, he cares." Margaret smiled knowingly. That's exactly why he's here. Bit by bit, David began to believe in himself. He no longer saw only the boy from the diner. He began to see what Margaret had seen from the very start. A man with integrity, strength, and the potential to rise far beyond his circumstances. Months turned into a year, and David's life transformed. With his new salary, he moved out of his cramped apartment to a modest but comfortable home. He bought better clothes, enrolled in night classes, and even began to save money, something he'd never been able to do before. At work, his dedication paid off. He was promoted from assistant to coordinator, then to project supervisor. Each step was earned not through privilege, but through his relentless work ethic and humility. People who once overlooked him began to seek his advice. He had become a respected figure within the company, but David never forgot where he came from. On weekends, he volunteered at shelters, serving meals to the homeless. He often told them, "I was sitting where you are not long ago. Don't give up. Life can change when you least expect it." His story inspired many, and his kindness spread. Further than he realized, Margaret often watched his growth with pride. One evening, she invited him to her office. "David," she said softly, "I'm proud of you. You remind me of something I've always believed. Wealth is measured not by what you have, but by what you give." David's eyes glistened. "You gave me a chance when I had nothing. I'll never forget that." She shook her head. "No, son, you gave me something first. On a rainy night, when I was just another stranger, you gave me kindness. That was worth more than any fortune." Those words stayed with David, shaping not just his career, but his heart. Years later, David Carter had risen higher than anyone could have predicted. From a struggling diner worker, he had become one of the key leaders at Ellis Enterprises, trusted by Margaret and admired by his colleagues. His story spread beyond the company, becoming an example of how one act of kindness could ripple into a lifetime of change. But David himself never let success change him. He still carried the memory of the stormy night when it all began. Whenever it rained, he would pause by his window, watching droplets race down the glass, and smile. The rain no longer reminded him of struggle. It reminded him of blessings. Interviews. When journalists asked about his journey, David always gave the same answer. It wasn't luck. It wasn't money. It was a choice. To help someone when I could have walked away, that choice shaped my future. He often visited schools and community centers, sharing his story with young people who felt hopeless. "You don't need money to change your life," he told them. "You need courage, kindness, and faith that what you give will come back to you." And as for Margaret Ellis, she lived the rest of her days knowing she had passed on more than wealth. She had passed on wisdom, compassion, and opportunity to someone who truly deserved it. David never called her just boss. To him, she became family, the grandmother he never had. And she in return called him the son she had always wanted. Their bond, born in a storm, proved something timeless. Kindness is never wasted. It may not come back tomorrow or the next day, but when it does, it can change your life forever. And so, the man who once walked home in the rain with nothing became a symbol of hope, proving to the world that even the smallest good deed can lead to the greatest destiny. Every story we bring is made with love and effort. By subscribing, liking, and sharing, you're not just supporting us, you're helping spread messages that can change lives. Join us on this journey of light.